Now, for this segment, the next, I want to bring Paul Watson up to go over this. This is so huge. And, Paul, before we get into this, what's a good name for it? Because people need a name. ClimateGate was what it was dubbed a week and a half ago. What do you call this? UN Gate? UN Dictatorship Gate? Dictatorship Gate? I mean, what do we call it, Paul?
I don't think there's a real catchy name for it. You could call it UNEP Gate, because that's the body that's put out these reports, UNEP. Or you could call it UN Gate.
Well, this is getting no attention, and I'm begging our incredible activist audience to get this article you've written that details it all and get it out to everyone they know. Bombshell, UN documents outline plan to use ClimateGate crooks and end run around national sovereignty. I mean, we have them. We have them in the document talking about how to deceive the public. I mean, it's just outrageous, these arrogant crooks. Paul Watson.
Yeah, this is actually two separate documents that were put out by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, which is the regulatory body that established the IPCC, which of course produced the politicised report saying that the lid was shut on global warming. It's a done deal. Now that ties into ClimateGate, because 2 days ago the IPCC came out and said that despite the fact that the ClimateGate emails and the data reveals that these scientists who were closely affiliated with the IPCC, they produced the data for them, they were caught manipulating the data to hide the decline in global warming. That's a quote, hide the decline.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's all this is a global corporate takeover. The UN is a private corporate holding company, the IMF and World Bank themselves holding companies for private banks. And they're just taking over. One of the planning papers entitled the UNEP that we want was produced by a specially selective group of influential environmental bureaucrats and delivered to the UNEP executive director, Achim Steiner. The United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, is the regulatory body that established the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. The politicized organization that has attempted to slam the lid shut on global warming skeptics by claiming it is the supreme authority, despite the fact that scientists used by the IPCC were caught manipulating data and conspiring to hide evidence of global cooling during the ClimateGate scandal. The IPCC has attempted to deny the gravitas of ClimateGate by claiming that it has no bearing on the conclusions about global warming. Now, they just keep saying, we have peer-reviewed journals. We have peer-reviewed journals, using the data directly from the head UN Climate Research Facility in East Anglia and the Goddard Space Center in the U.S. Despite the fact that scientists at the University of East Anglia used intimidation and academic witch hunts to ensure that the data they didn't agree with politically was blocked from appearing in the IPCC's fourth assignment report, which was published in 2007. We're going back to Watson in a moment, but here's what's important. The UN got 25 select scientists out of hundreds of thousands of hydrologists, climatologists, geologists, atmospheric experts, meteorologists. Just 31,000 in the U.S. sent letters to Congress saying it was a fraud. So we have 31,000. They have 2,500. And they keep saying every scientist on Earth agrees with us. That's another giant hoax. These people say polar bears can't swim, and they're all dying when their numbers are exploding. They say the North and South ice caps were going to melt by 2008. They're there bigger than ever. It's all lies. They point video cameras at glaciers that every year in the spring it piles up during the winter, and during the spring, it sloughs off icebergs. And they tell you, look, it's melting. They use parlor-level 5-year-old tricks on you. I mean, Al Gore says he invented the Internet. He said NAFTA and GATT was going to be great. He's in league with Enron. Participants who contributed to the first UNEP document included Janos Pastor, currently head of the team pushing the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's unprecedented Seal the Deal lobbying campaign to pressure the UN member governments into signing a new environmental agreement at Copenhagen. And it goes on. And then there's a whole other level of these documents that Paul's linked to, where they talk about how to brainwash kids, how to have the kids rebuke their parents. These are quotes. Now, I'm going to try to shut up, Paul. I'm going to turn my mic off for the next 10 minutes, and I want you to go over the latest on ClimateGate, how this ties into it, their own document on how to brainwash kids, how to turn them against their parents. I mean, this is outrageous. The actual quotes go over all of that, and then how we see the brainwashing manifesting in the high schools, in the middle schools, mainstream news reporting how their kids come home and start singing, global warming's going to kill us, we've got to have the global government. I mean, this is like Mao Zedong took over. This is it. This is happening. Paul Joseph Watson, you've got the floor.
Yeah, the key quote to arise out of these newly uncovered documents, and bear in mind that they were produced 2 years ago. So everything that they lay out is already happening. They talk about tagging the environmental agenda to the economy, which is exactly what happened immediately after the collapse. They really push that because they can get their regulations through easier by saying it's also to save the economy and green jobs and all this kind of propaganda. So everything in there is already happening. Now, the main quote to arise out of it in relation to ClimateGate is they talk about how they have to get academics on board. The quote is they have to recruit the academic world in order that they can be, quote, harnessed to the UNEP mission without appearing to make an end run around the member government. Now, there's several, we can break that down. Firstly, quote, harnessed to the UNEP mission. These are scientists that are supposed to produce unbiased, accurate, fair data about global warming, and yet the United Nations is talking about recruiting them and harnessing them to the UNEP mission. And what is the UNEP mission? Well, it's laid out in these documents. It's global regulatory powers over nation states in all areas of the environment and the economy. And then, quote, environmental Bretton Woods for the 21st century. It's about global government. So they're saying we need to get these academics on board so that they can help us create this global government without appearing, the key word is appearing, to make an end run around the member governments. So they're basically admitting that it is making an end run around the member governments, but they just don't want it to appear as if it's doing so by reaching out to these academics and hiring them and getting them to carry the propaganda about global warming. And the rest of the document is basically an outline of how they're going to erect this dictatorial, unelected, regulatory global government, and it ties in with the same methods that they're pushing at Copenhagen. With reference to the reaching out to the children,